Hello and welcome to the HTML 101 Kickstart video course. This particular video is video number 1, and that is the introduction to HTML. Just want to say congratulations on grabbing access to this video course. So many people online, whether it's online business, online careers, or anything mainly to do with setting up web pages or landing pages, regardless of what niche that you are in, you oftentimes face these technological pains over and over again when it comes to setting up these basic landing pages. Even if you're using something like WordPress or Joomla and it's a content management system that most of things are done for you, there will be at times when you need to edit things like hyperlinks or even basic things like headers, images, break tags to make things look nice. And they run into snags along the way. So if you run into those snags like everybody else along the road because you do not know basic HTML coding, then don't fret. That's the purpose of this video course. So what I want to do is start out with some of the basics, and then we will move out to some of the more advanced when you feel like you're more confident and you get your feet wet. Now, before we jump into the introduction piece, I want to give you a quick videos overview so you know exactly what to expect and exactly what we are going to talk about step by step throughout this video course. So obviously this is going to be video number 1. Video number 2 is going to be hacking without knowing code. So I want to start out with utilizing a HTML editing tool called a WYSIWYG tool. More on that in just a minute. Now, by utilizing that tool, it'll get your feet wet so that you can feel a little bit more confident when it comes to HTML code. So you'll be able to see the code and you'll be able to see what it looks like in the browser view. So by hacking without knowing code, this is a specific strategy that you can utilize in the future where if you don't know coding, there's still a way to hack around HTML coding and make things look nice and things like that. But at the end of the day, you want to know basic HTML coding, which we'll dive into video number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So number 3, we're going to talk about the basics of open and close tags. Once you understand this basic concept and how HTML code opens and closes via their tags, which is very, very simple, by the way, it will make more sense. And then from that point on, what I've done is I've honed in and focused on specific tags that you will run into during your journey. So headings is something that you're going to run into on and on and on. So we're going to focus on that in video number 4. Video number 5, we're going to talk about break tags. Break tags allow you to break sentences up so that you have white space in between. This is also good by creating white space between images and everything like that. Video number 6, we're going to talk about basic formatting, underlining, bolding, italicizing, things like that you are going to run into. Video number 7, we're going to talk about lists, unordered lists and ordered lists. How do you create these types of lists? Because this is something that you're going to want to do. And video number 8, we're going to talk about image tags, how to make them SEO friendly, and of course, video number 9, we're going to talk about hyperlinks. Now, not just how to create a hyperlink, but how to make it so when somebody clicks on it, it opens up in a new window. So this is something that you are going to face over and over again. And that's why we're focusing specifically on these tags. Now, in order to memorize HTML code, I want to give you some pointers. You do not need to learn all HTML code. So that's good. Do not get freaked out or anything like that. You do not need to learn all HTML code. You just need to know the basics. And it'll make more sense as we dive in. And what I recommend that you do is that you should always be able to refer back to this video course at a later time. And if you want to watch to the end of the video course and then implement things and then refer back, that's totally fine. Now, one thing I found that helps when it comes to memorization oftentimes is that it's easier to do things while I teach, to make things stick. So while I teach, if you want to pause the video at any time and then implement it yourself, that will actually stick more stronger in your brain so that as you act and you do it, it'll stick in your mind. So some people are different. That works very well with kinesthetic visual learners. You can watch all the way to the end and then follow along. That's totally fine. So do what's best for you. Don't feel like you have to do it in a certain way. So now let's talk about the tools that you're going to need. Obviously, I'm not going to require you to dish out any more money. So we're going to stick with a lot of free things like Composer. Composer actually is a tool that I use. Even though I understand HTML coding, I still use Composer because Composer is a great way to hack, like I said, without needing to know a lot of code. So we will talk about more about that in video number 2. Now, Composer is another WYSIWYG HTML editor tool. You don't have to use Composer if you don't want to. If you want to go to Google and you type in WYSIWYG HTML editor, as you can see here, then you'll see a variety of other tools. Now, what you see is what you get. That means that it's kind of like Microsoft Word in a sense that you can see what's happening on the screen, but on the back end, there's a lot of code that's happening. So I'll show you that in just a minute. And Composer, I'd highly recommend. We use it all the time, and we always recommend it for many, many years. It's been going well over 5, 6, 7 years. Now, you can always refer back to W3 Schools as well if you want to. But as far as tools that you have to pay for, none that we would recommend right now. So that's it. Nothing really fancy. And if you want to know how to find Composer, let me go ahead and show you that right now. So the easiest way to access Composer, the HTML editing tool, because we are going to be utilizing this tool in this video course, is by going to kompozer.net, as you can see up right here. So that's kompozer. So it's kind of like Composer with a C, but it has a K. Now, as you can see, it is a easy web authoring tool. It's what we call a what you see is what you get. So you see it on the screen as a web editing tool, and the code will actually be shown on the back end. So I'll show you that in just a minute, but I highly recommend just go ahead and download this. This one is for Windows, so if you are using a Mac or Linux computer, that's fine. It is compatible as well. You just got to go to the download link here. So if you go here, you'll be able to see there's a stable version and there is a developed version. But if you scroll all the way about midpoint of the page, you'll see different languages. You'll see them for Windows installers, Windows zip files, Mac OS, download images, and Linux as well. So it is compatible to just about any type of PC, an operating system, the 3 main ones right here. So go ahead and download that, install that onto your computer, because that is what we will be using next. Now, before I move on to video number 2, we are going to talk about the basic structure of an HTML body. So whenever you create a new HTML page, then basically what it looks like is at the top, you're going to have an HTML tag, and think about it wrapping it around if you can think about it. So you have the HTML, you have the head, which is right underneath the HTML. So this is kind of saying, okay, this is a HTML page, and then the next thing you'll see is the head. And if you think about a human body, you have the head, and then right maybe on the head, right below that, you could have like a name tag, like the title or something. And then right below that or on that, you can have a body. And then of course you have your feet and everything like that. So that's probably the easiest way to think about it. You have HTML, if you can think of like a stick figure or something. You got the HTML guy, he's got a head, and then he's got a name tag, that's a title, and then he's got a body. If you can remember that, then it's actually fairly easy to understand when I move on to video number 2 and I break it down for you. So let's move on to video number 2, and it'll make a lot more sense when we actually go there. So in video number 2, we're going to talk about hacking HTML without knowing code. And what I mean by that is being able to set up landing pages and basic web pages, and understanding how to do it without knowing code is the first way to get your feet wet and get yourself confident. So let's get started. So what I want you to go ahead and do is go ahead and open up Composer and pause this video if you need to, and we'll get started. So what I mean by hacking HTML, as I said earlier, is we are using a tool that will allow us to see what the user sees via the browser without actually having to add our own code. Now, this is the normal view. So at the very bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see the normal tab, as you can see here. And then you're going to see the source tab. So the source tag is going to reveal the actual HTML code to us. And as I stated in the previous video, I basically went over the basic structure. You can see there is an HTML tag here. There is a heading tag, and the heading tag gets closed here, and then the body starts here, and so forth. Now, I will talk more about open and close tags and the concept of that in the next video. So don't worry about that right now. Let's just focus on utilizing the tool so that you can use it, get confident, get your feet wet right now. So the nice thing about Composer is it looks kind of like Microsoft Word, but a simplified version of it in a way. So what you see is what you get. So what you see in the normal tab is what you get. So let's say, for example, that we are going to say dog training, and then we highlight that. We can center align that, as you can see here. We can left align, right align, and so forth. You can bold it. You can make it bigger by clicking on here. You can also make it smaller. So what you see here is what the user is going to see. And that is what you see is what you get HTML editor. Now you can also change the color, let's say to red, and we can also change the background to, let's say, something like yellow. So this would be a highlighted color. If we wanted the whole line to turn, let's say, yellow, we could do that as well. You can also go further and you can add things like tables. So let's go back here and remove the highlight, and we can add a table. So what I like about Composer is it gives you the ability to specify, okay, I want this many columns and I want this many rows. So in this case, I'm just going to do 4, and you can specify the cell spacing, which is in between each cell. How much spaces do you want? So this is a table here. We can always tweak it if we would like to. So if we right click here, for example, and we go to table cell properties and we go to table, we can add more rows. So if we are not satisfied that it only has 2, we can always add 10. And if we're not satisfied by 2 columns, we could add something like 5. And we could also remove the border, so you can actually see the border here, but we can actually remove it so that the users do not see the border. And it becomes like this. So if we do that, then the user can't see the actual border and they don't realize that there's a table there, and you can start adding text. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do. And in addition to that, you can also add images, you can add forms, you can also add links to other websites, and you can make sure that they open in new windows. So if somebody clicks on your link and you want them to stay on your web page, but you want to bring them to another page so it opens in a new window, you can say something like http://www.google.com as an example. And you can say link is to be open in a new window. So when you do that, when somebody clicks this link, it's going to open in a brand new window, and that way they don't forget about your own window. And I'm going to actually show you the code to do this, because once you have memorized this code, it's going to make your life a lot easier. You're not going to have to fully rely on Composer, which you can, but it's just going to slow you down. Now, if we take a look in the source, we can see that it has changed from the basic HTML header, body, and so forth. So now we have a huge empty table here, which is the table. And that's what's so easy about HTML is you can specify, you can read this, you can say, okay, here's a table, here is the actual link right here, and it'll make more sense. Don't worry about it. Don't let this code freak you out or anything like that. So I just wanted to show you that it changed, and it changed slightly. Now you can also add things like images. So if we click on image here, we can specify the location of the image. Now, one thing to be aware of with Composer is when you specify the location of the image, generally speaking, if you, let's say, we'll pick one image here. By default, let's say, for example, that we are going to choose this image here. Now, as you can see, this image location is actually pointing straight to my computer, which is not really what we want. What we want it to do is we want it to point to the actual website. Now, in general, I'd say the best thing and the easiest way to do it is simply linking directly to the image itself. So the image file name I would put here, and I would remove everything else before that. So that way the image actually shows up. Now, you can't see the image because right now it is pointing to the website. But if you know how to add an image via the actual HTML code, and you know the HTML code itself, then you won't have to face this problem. You will know how to fix this issue, which is why I say we are going to focus on these basic tags, and then you will learn exactly how to make these tags, and they are standard. They do not change. And because that is the case, my hope is by the end of this video course, when you run into these issues, you will no longer have these issues again, because you will have the right weapon, which is the code, in hand in your brain. So that's how to add an image, and we'll talk more about the other codes in the next video. So in this particular video, we are going to talk about open and close tags. Now, this is the basic fundamentals so that once you understand this, it's going to make more sense when you see the code itself. So basically, in order to create an HTML document, it always has to have HTML with brackets surrounding it, and then a close tag, which looks like the open tag, except for you have a slash right before the words that are inside of the bracket. As long as you understand this is an open tag and this is a closed tag, then all the tags that you're going to see and the codes and the syntax and the language, they all have an open tag and a closed tag, with exception to the break tag. So I'll show you that in just a minute. Now, if we go over to Composer and we take a look at the source code here, you'll notice that the HTML tag here starts here, and then at the very end, it closes up, right? And then of course the head tag has what we call an open tag right here. It opens it up, and then you have to close the head right here. So same with the title tag. The title tag, this is opening the title, and then within here you can put the actual title. So let's say, for example, that we have a dog training blog post that talks about how to stop your puppy from biting. So you know how to go to Google and you see the titles for each website, and then of course you see a description? That is where the title is right here. You're getting a quick glimpse of how the code here gets read by the browser, and then of course by Google or other search engines. So you see how this works. So we have an open tag, and then we close this sentence with the close tag for this particular word, title. And then of course heading, you can see here, we close the heading, and then after you close the head, then you can start with the body. Now you see how the body starts here, and then the body closes here. So everything else that's actually inside of your landing page is going to be inside of the body. Now notice that the break tag does not have an open and close tag. The break tag can essentially stand alone. So you're going to have some words that are standalone that don't need an open and close. But if we go to the normal view, and let's say, for example, that we want to center align a word. So we'll do word. We will center align that. Now, if I go to source, you can see that a div tag is being used to center align that word, and the div tag gets closed. Now, don't worry about the div tag or all these other tags. I'm trying to explain the concept that in most cases, something has to be opened and closed, right? So you can have all sorts of words and then you close it down. Now, if I go back to normal, and let's say I want to bold a word, and I go back to source, you can see that the style has been added for bold. Now, you don't need to know this stuff. I'm just showing you this so that you understand that for most cases, there's an open tag and a closed tag for the majority of cases. And then, of course, there are certain cases that are rare cases, like the break tag, which can stand alone. That does not need an open and closed tag. Essentially, it is the same. So now that you understand this concept, you can actually begin to move on to the next videos, and we'll go over the basic tags like the break tag, the hyperlink tag, and everything like that. So don't worry about understanding the tags and what they mean yet. Just understand that, we have the basic HTML tag, and then they close down. The basic head tag, and they close down. So one way to learn HTML without me even teaching you is simply by going to the normal view, doing one step at a time. So like I showed you earlier, we start from scratch. If I go down here, I click on source, I can see what has changed. So I've essentially made a lot of breaks. So spaces and enters down here. And I put the word here. I take a look at source and ask yourself what has changed. Look at the code, see what has changed, and then do the next step. Make it bold. See what has changed at that point. So that's another good way to learn HTML from scratch, by actually doing something to it that you want it to do, whether changing the color, making it bigger, changing the heading. And that's a good way to learn HTML by a step-by-step manner. So with that said, I'm going to go to the next videos, and we will show you exactly other tags that are very common that you are likely to face. See you there. Hello and welcome back. This particular video, we are going to talk about heading tags. As you know, whenever you create a blog post or a landing page or a website, you will notice that the headings at the very top tend to be very, very big, right? So that's what we're going to talk about, is that particular tag. Now, that particular tag, you'll oftentimes people say H1 tags, H2 tags, H3, and more. So really what it's defined by, if we do an H1 tag, remember there's two brackets that are surrounding that particular word, H1. So it can be lowercase h and it can be uppercase H. It really doesn't matter. So if you're wondering if there's a difference, there's really no difference. So you start that tag out. So you open the tag up, and now you can put the word. So this is going to be your headline, your heading, the big word title, whatever you want it to be. So you will write out the headline text here. And when it's time to close that down, remember, it's going to be H1, except the end tag is going to have a slash right before the word. So if I minimize this, that's what it looks like. So H1, the actual text, and then you close it out by doing H1, but a slash right before here. So bracket slash and then the word. So that's what a H1 tag or headline tag is. Now, If you want to have a heading, but you don't want it to be as big as maybe the first headline, and maybe you have like a sub headline that you want it to be a little bit smaller, then the way this works is it increases the number. So it's a little bit backward thinking, but number one, if you think about top one, number one, number two, number three. So if you think about like the Olympics, for example, the number one person, the number two person, number three person. So if you think about it that way, the number one person has a bigger prize. So in this case, bigger headline. The number two person has a not as big as number one, but a lot bigger than number three. So that's kind of how it works. So if you want to decrease in size, it's going to go from H2, H3, H4, and so forth and so on. And you would do this exact same thing. This could be something like a sub-headline text, and then we can close that off with /H2. And this could be something like a sectional headline, and we close it off in H3. So as the number gets bigger, the heading gets smaller, but it's still a headline. Now, when Google comes along, for example, and they read these headlines, they say, okay, this is a headline. This is a headline. This might be not as important as this headline. We don't know exactly, but that's what we've seen. Now, if you go back over to Composer and apply this knowledge that I have taught you, so we'll go here, we'll create a blank page. So besides the title, what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and I'm going to say headline text. Now, what I'm going to do is under body text drop down here, click on that and you're going to see heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So obviously the main big headline is going to be H1, right? Now, if I go to the source tab, you will be able to see that it does indeed say H1. Headline text, and then it closes it off. Of course, if we highlight this again and we change to say heading 2, you see how it gets smaller? Change it to heading 3 and it gets smaller, and the greater the heading, the smaller we get. So if you think about the Olympic analogy that I talked about earlier, that's how it works. So obviously this is heading 3. So if we take a look at the source code here, we can see it starts with H3 and then it closes off. So I wanted to cover headlines simply because headlines are something that you're generally speaking going to use all the time, especially when it comes to landing pages, web pages, even WordPress. Any type of content management system will use this type of code and it's universal. So hopefully that makes sense and we'll move on to the next video. So the next thing I want to talk about is break tags. I briefly talked about this in the previous videos, but break tags is something that you're going to use over and over again, and most likely you will run into them or you'll run into a situation where you will need to use them. So what are break tags? Break tags are essentially pressing the enter key on your keyboard. So for example, we have sentence, and then we have a sentence, and then we press the enter on our keyboard, and as you can see, it goes down. So that's what break tags essentially do, but they do them within the HTML world. So if you want to spread images apart and have one image at the top, maybe a few breaks in between, and then put an image, and then maybe break it, and then have a few paragraphs and break that paragraph apart, it really adds white space and makes things look a lot nicer so that they're not all clumped together. So that's really what break tags are all about. Now, break tags, you'll see them sometimes and they'll look like this. So I talked about this previously and I might have shown it to you previously, but they typically look like this. So let me make it a little bigger here. So they have the brackets around them like usual, and then they have BR. So BR lowercase, BR capitalized, it doesn't really matter. So I like to keep things consistently, so I try to do things lowercase. So it's really up to you. And because if you're thinking, does it really matter? Well, there you go. Now, break tags, they sometimes look like this. And then, of course, the newer ones may look like this, where it has a BR space slash. But they do the same thing. Now, the break tag is not they don't have an open tag and close tag. It's just combined together. So essentially the break tag is the open and close tag itself. So this is one of the special cases where in this case there isn't really an open and close. So what's nice about breaks is that, let's say for example you have a word like a whole paragraph. So we have paragraph like this. So we do this, and I'll make a paragraph like this. Okay, so this is a paragraph. What's nice about the break is, yes, if you are using a HTML WYSIWYG editor like Composer, you can simply go through and press enter, right? Now, if you're looking at the code from the standpoint of just the code itself, and you want to put breaks into the paragraph or the images, and it's just not doing it, then you can always go into the code and you can find where there should be breaks and just put the BR tag. You can put the BR tag here, and let's say I want to break here, I want to break here, and I want to break maybe here, here, and here. So when I copy this over, let's say for example into Composer, into the source tag, maybe under right here, you can see that there are breaks. So we've broken it up here. Now, if we go back to the source tab and we say, okay, it had a break, but we want an additional break to create kind of a empty space or a line in between these paragraphs. So if that's the case, then all I have to do is add 2 breaks connected to each other. So there we go. So obviously adding breaks is very, very easy. And when I go back to the normal view, I'm able to see that. So like I said, the majority of cases you can use a WYSIWYG editor, but there are some cases that you will run into where the editor is messing up, or even WordPress. I've seen sometimes when editing WordPress editors, sometimes you're editing the code and you're running into issues, and by knowing that I can go to the source code and simply add a break tag to the source code, it makes life a lot easier. So same thing with images. You can add an image. So we can go here, we can add an image like so, but let's say for example that it looks like this. You got text here and then you got an image here. So what I would personally do is I would find, with a WYSIWYG editor, obviously all you have to do is press enter, right? But if you were reading the code and you couldn't figure out why maybe the editor was doing that, you could find the image, which is defined by the image tag right here, which you'll learn later on. But once you find that, all I have to do is add a break tag to it. Let's say, for example, I want to add 3 break tags. Go back to normal view, and you can see that there have been 3 break tags right here. So that's what the break tag does, and it actually comes in very, very handy in many, many cases. You wouldn't believe how many cases it would come in handy, and it doesn't really make sense right now, but it'll make a lot more sense when you begin to set up your landing pages, set up your WordPress sites, and everything like that. And it just makes life a lot easier when you understand how to use it. So that's how simple a break tag is. Just remember, it's a BR, or sometimes it's BR slash as well. So I like to just keep it simple, stick with that, and there you go.